This happened to me late in the spring of 2007, early in the morning, around 6:30 a.m. It creeped me out so bad that it stuck with me since it happened. I woke up to a bark coming from down the hall and rolled onto my back. My body didn't want to get up yet. Another bark. "Alfie, it's okay," I called out from my bedroom. Alfie was a nearly 2-year-old dog with a lot of anxiety, which was probably intensified by my personality. He was not accustomed to being around new people, which led to me taking him out for early morning walks. Selfishly, I was hoping he had just seen a person walking by the house or something, and then he barked again. Guess I won't be going back to sleep. The houses in that area backed onto a small grove and a public park with 2 baseball diamonds side by side, followed by a tennis court and a playground. It was flanked by the back of a plaza to the west. There was a path that went between the diamonds and led to the playground. We were making our way through the trees towards the path. I let out a yawn and I rubbed my eyes. Bang! A loud metallic noise greeted us from the west. I expected Alfie to start barking, so I firmly gripped the leash, but he seemed unfazed and generally happy to be outside. Alfie stopped by a tree and lifted his leg, just as I would be able to get a clear view of where that sound came from. I glanced to my right, and behind the plaza there was a man pacing in front of a large dumpster. He stood tall and looked like he was in great shape, but something about the way that he was walking made me think he was older, possibly elderly. He wore a dark paddy cap and a black windbreaker with light beige khakis. He was carrying something, a club, or maybe a bat. He stopped suddenly and struck the dumpster with it. Bang! Alfie's bark startled me. I bent down and tried to calm him down, despite not being entirely able to calm myself. "It's okay, Alf. It's okay." He looked at me and he tilted his head sideways. I gave him a head rub. "Freaking dog," I muttered to myself with a chuckle as I started to relax. As I stood up, my body reminded me how stiff it was. I took a deep breath and I leaned back to stretch, noticing the morning dew was on the leaves above. When I came back to the present, my heart skipped a beat. The man was looking at me. I immediately looked away and pulled on Alfie's leash, guiding him forward to the path. My mind was racing with anxiety. What the heck? Is he watching me? He has a weapon? What does he want? Okay, I'm overreacting. Just relax, breathe. I focused on my breathing and I kept moving. We walked along the path for a few minutes before Alfie stopped to pee again. I took a deep breath and I glanced back to the plaza. He was gone. See, nothing to worry about, I told myself and turned back to Alfie. He turned around facing me, but his gaze was set back from where we came. I turned around and my eyes went wide. Oh man. The guy was walking along the baseball diamond towards the area of the grove that we had come from. Maybe he's going home, I thought. My attempt to be optimistic wasn't working this time, though. I kept watching as he walked along the fence. He was coming up towards the corner where the grove and the path met. Come on, turn left and go home. He turned right. He was headed in our direction with his eyes set on us. I had a better view on him. He was definitely older, probably in his 60s. He moved as if his years hadn't caught up with him yet, and he was gripping an aluminum baseball bat. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I looked down at Alfie and suddenly felt very protective. I took a breath and I looked back at the man. "What do you want?" I shouted. He didn't respond. Judging by his blank expression, I wasn't sure if he even had heard me. "Look, man, you're creeping me out. Back off." Nothing. He kept walking. I tugged on the leash to let Alfie know that it was time we needed to move. We started walking quickly away from him. "It's gonna be all right. We're going home," I said out loud, mostly to myself. Alfie came bouncing beside me as if he took on a light jog to keep up. I looked ahead to the park hoping to see if there were any other people, but it was completely empty. We were approaching the tennis court. The baseball diamond and the tennis court were separated by a grassy path with bleachers and a sitting area for the team. I looked back and the man was still coming, but he was falling behind. He couldn't keep up with our pace. "Screw you," I muttered to myself and I let my jaw unclench. I guided Alfie to the right, towards the bleachers. I noticed Alfie was panting. He deserved a break. I scooped him up into my arms. "You're such a good boy," I told him. Going between the diamond and the tennis court would lead me directly to the plaza. If I could walk around the front, I'd be able to get us home quickly. Walking as fast as I could with Alfie in my arms was more taxing than I expected. As I stepped off the grass and onto the pavement behind the plaza, I put him back down. Bang! I swung around and saw that the man was no longer following us. He was standing between the bleachers, with the bat resting up against his shoulders. He was still staring at us, and the grimacing look on his face gave me chills. I turned away to walk home, and the old man drifted out of my sight and to never be seen again. My mother once told me a story that jolted me to the bone. My mother, Anna, had an older sister named Francie. Francie was 3 years older than her. Back in those days, if my aunt wanted to go anywhere, she had to bring along her younger sister. Now, my aunt was the clubbing type of lady. She would doll my mom up so that she would appear older. That way they could both get into the clubs. My mom was an introvert and didn't really like the whole club scene. Her sister would beg her and eventually convince her to go. One night in particular, she had really wanted to hit up this new club. My mom tried to tell her she didn't want to go, but my Aunt Francie bullied her until my mother bent and decided to go. The club was filled with sleazy drunks and the smell of sweat and alcohol. Needless to say, my mother wanted out. She begged my Aunt Francie to leave, but no luck, no budging. My aunt was caught up in the grasp of a not as nearly handsome in the daylight clubber. So my mom, feeling just stuck, had enough, and she decided to risk her chances and walk home. Their house was a 20-minute journey on foot, but the idea of staying another second in that club was an unbearable thought. So she headed out, her sister not even knowing she left. It's 1 a.m. in the morning, and she was only 14. As she was walking, she noticed a car creeping alongside of her. The window rolled down, and inside the vehicle were 2 men in their mid-20s. "Hey girl," one said. "Do you know what time it is?" She ignored them and continued walking, but at a faster rate than before. The guy then said, "Hey, you need a ride home? It's not safe walking out in the middle of the night alone." So as an unwitty 14-year-old, she said, "Okay," and got into the car with these 2 guys. She told them her house was only 10 minutes down the street, so they drove. They ended up taking a detour down towards the train tracks, the complete opposite way of her house. The men stopped their car and whispered to one another. Growing frantic, yells out, "You guys ready? My family's expecting me home soon." She then fibs in favor of frightening them to take her home. "My dad works at the police station. He probably was already looking for me." The men stare back at the car and ask her, "Is he a police officer?" She replies, "Yeah, something like that." The men drive her to the corner of where her house was. They then say to her, "Glad we could take you back home safely." She scrambled clumsily off the car and runs towards her house. She couldn't see it from the back seat, but there was a horde of police cars outside of her house. When she walked up, her parents grabbed her and hugged her. She explained what had happened and how she just wanted to go home. With the police in view, my grandfather turned and slapped my Aunt Francie. The police didn't even wince. They had also heard the story and probably felt like the slap was just. Thinking of what could have been brings the hairs on my neck to a raise. Why did they go to the train tracks? What were they talking about? Did the comment of my father, who in actuality was a construction worker, being an officer, save her life? I'll never know, but I'm glad it turned out the way it did. A little bit of background info on me. I am 20 and I've never dated, kissed, or even had any type of romantic conversations with any guy. So I tend to tense up a little bit when guys flirt, and it honestly makes me feel uncomfortable. The story begins in August of 2017. I was 18 and I was just starting my first job at a call center. I am very outgoing and I'm a loud person once I'm comfortable, but when I walk into a place where I don't know anybody, I tend to look mean and cold. Since I am the embodiment of punctuality, I was late by a few minutes to my first day of training, so when I entered the room, I sat at the very last seat. However, the trainer told me to move to the front, since there was an empty seat, so I did. And I had to sit next to this guy named Alex. The training continued, and Alex would try to speak to me, and I was already late on my first day. I didn't want to be even more disrespectful and not pay attention, so I would respond with very short answers. Training lasted 1 month and I never sat next to him again. Since I work at a call center, we have a very strict break schedule, as we always need to make sure there are enough people on the phone. And since luck is always on my side, we were given the same lunch schedule. Our eating area doesn't have many tables, and people obviously eat with their friend groups. Since I was new, I obviously didn't have a group, so I decided to sit on the table with all the newer employees, him included. Big mistake. I think he took this as a signal that I liked him, as 3 days after, he started texting me since he had my phone number, since we were in the same training group chat. I would make my responses as short as possible, since he made me feel pretty uncomfortable. He would say stuff like, "You sure you haven't had a boyfriend yet? You have the face of a girl who's at least screwed 3 guys, or you better hope that we are never in a room alone, because I really want to make sure that you're actually a virgin." Once again, I am not experienced in sex or relationships or anything related, so this made me feel very uncomfortable. I would try to avoid him at work. However, I started becoming friends with the other people at our lunch table, and for some reason, I was ashamed of telling them all the stuff that he was saying, so I just shut up. He would ask me out repeatedly over text, and then started doing it during lunch in front of our other colleagues, and I always respectfully declined. He then started to make very passive-aggressive comments about girls who think they're above everybody else, and how they're gonna end up alone because they think that no guy is ever good enough. Classic nice guy behavior. One day I was fed up, and I snapped during lunch, and came at him aggressively, and told him that he was creepy, and I just was not attracted to him at all, and that was the reason why I would never go out with him. He acted like the victim, and everybody took his side, because they didn't know all the crap that he'd been saying when they weren't there. A few weeks after this happened, I was minding my own business at my desk, and someone else from the table, named Carlos, came to me and said how he went past your house the other day. I was confused since I'd only been working at this place about 5 months, and I'd never brought anybody home. So I said, "What do you mean? You don't even know where my house is?" To which he responded, "I don't, but Alex took us. He said he took you home once." That freaked me out because that never happened. At this point, I thought Carlos was just messing with me until he started describing my house, and I just told him, "That's not my house." Extremely creeped out because he was giving me the exact description of my house. After this past incident, nothing else really happened, or through text messages. I stopped eating lunch with the group and I just avoided him at all costs. At the beginning of 2019, he announced that he was quitting, and honestly, I was very happy. Even though he stopped harassing me, I still felt awkward and uncomfortable, just knowing that we were in the same building. Fast forward to March of 2020. I have my Instagram profile set to public because I'm too lazy to go through requests, and I received a DM from him asking me out. Obviously, I declined. I share a room with my 10-year-old sister, so I always leave the room at around 10 p.m. and go to the living room to start watching Netflix, and return to the room to sleep around 2 a.m. After this, he started going on one of those, "I'm a great guy, and you're an ugly girl who would be lucky to date me" rants, when all of a sudden I hear a car pull up in front of my house, and I receive a video chat request. Once the phone stopped ringing, I heard somebody say, "Come out, you owe me this." In a not too loud, but loud enough for me to hear tone, I received a new video chat request. This kept on around 20 minutes until I heard the car leave. Ever since then, I'm extremely paranoid whenever I'm in the living room, because Alex could be anywhere, at any time, watching me. This just happened earlier tonight, and I know it's not very extreme, but I'm quite freaked out and I really just needed to get this out of my system. So here we go. I'm a fairly small human with a very large dog. I'm a female about 5'1" and pretty skinny, and my dog is an Akita, around 100 pounds, and probably stronger than me if she actually ever tried. We go for walks twice a day, every day, for about 3 miles, and one of these is at night. We live in the middle of a metropolitan area, so there are a lot of hotels and stores and restaurants all over the place, and there are always people out and about. I've never really felt unsafe walking around our area with my large dog, especially since all of these businesses regularly have patrolling police cars and several private security agencies all around. We have lived here for nearly 3 years, walking every day and night without a single problem. But on to tonight. We left for our normal walk, and while the streets are far less crowded, there are still some people out. We were about a mile from our apartment building when I walked past a man standing at a convenience store in a dark gray hoodie. A lot of the homeless population around here sit outside of the convenience stores regularly, so I didn't initially think anything of it. We stepped to the edge of the sidewalk so that we could be about 6 feet away and intended to just walk past, but the man started to follow us and talk to me. He asked me about my dog at first. This is very common for us, because she's not a well-known breed, and she is beautiful, if somewhat intimidating of an animal. Unfortunately, in this instant, intimidating does not translate to aggressive. Never thought that I would complain that my aggressive-looking dog is really just a giant teddy bear, but here we are. I answer that she is an Akita, and I continue to walk, keeping a good amount of distance between myself and the man, who for now I will call CG. CG starts asking why I'm walking away from him, and specifically says that that's rude because we are old friends. I looked at him to make sure that I wasn't wrong, and I said loudly, "No, I don't know you." I start walking faster, and I cross the street because I could see police lights flashing not far up the street. Sometimes the patrol cars will leave their lights on when there is nobody inside of them. I'm not sure why, but that was the case here. I walked much more quickly towards the lights with CG following me, telling me that I'm being mean and calling me Ashley over and over. To be clear, my name is not Ashley. While there was no security guard in the car, there were a few other people around, so I turned around and I yelled again, "I don't know you. Leave me alone." CG stopped walking towards me, but I heard him mumble something else about whoever Ashley is. At this point, I really just wanted to get home as quickly as possible, because I was a little bit panicked. This man was much taller than me and looked fairly large, at least compared to me, so it made me feel pretty nervous that he had been following me. I decided to take an indirect route home that would take me away from the street that I was currently on, that CG had been sitting on originally. It was a few more blocks away down a different street when I saw him again. I had been keeping an eye out behind me to see if he had followed me, but no. He had crossed the street and was in front of me. I don't know if he had been hoping I wouldn't notice and would walk up to him or what. I think that must be it, because CG had put a bandana over his face and had pulled up the hood, but I recognized the jacket and the frame, and I was positive it was the same guy. To get home, I would have to cross the street and walk right towards him. Instead, I crossed the street parallel to where he was, and he did as well. Then continued to walk towards me and started shouting, calling me Ashley again. I didn't hear a lot of what he said, but I turned with the dog, and I ran in the other direction. About a block away was a hotel, so I walked into the lobby and right to the front desk. The front desk worker could tell that something was off, because clearly I was trying not to cry. I apologized for bringing in my big dog, but said that somebody had been following me, and I wanted to know if I could wait here and call the police. The worker was very kind, and walked to the glass door and asked which man it was. I couldn't see him anymore in the direction from which I had come, so for a moment I thought that CG had left. But no, he was at the other end of the parking entrance, hood down now, but standing against the wall as if he was ready to just wait. The worker said I could wait as long as I needed, and he called the police from the hotel phone. I think they had the non-emergency line written down, and since he technically had not done anything but yell and follow me for a while, I agreed that the non-emergency line was probably the right choice. A cruiser showed up fairly soon though, and I pointed out CG to the cops, who was still just waiting there against the wall. Technically I couldn't prove that he had done anything illegal, but the cops went and told him that he needed to leave because he was trespassing on the property. They waited for him to leave and then gave me and my dog a ride back to my apartment building to make sure that he didn't continue to follow us and find out where we lived. I don't know who CG was or who Ashley was, but I hope that Ashley doesn't meet him either. This happened a good 20 plus years ago, and I'd forgotten about it until today. I think it's a good reminder that sometimes the most unexpected things can happen when you least expect it. This event really made me feel like I couldn't be safe anywhere and caused me to be hyper vigilant every time I left my house, and that feeling stayed with me for a long time afterwards. Also, a trigger warning, this involves assault of a sexual nature. It was winter time about 11 in the morning, and I was standing at a bus stop. This bus stop was in a mini mall, where there was a bigger department store, a dollar store, and another little shop. I was going to try to catch the bus to my brand new job, and that day it was going to be my very first day at the new shop, so I was excited and nervous and definitely wanted to make a good impression. While I was waiting for the bus, I realized I was a good 15 minutes early, and also that I had forgotten my gloves, and it was bitterly cold out, and my hands were freezing. But I only had a couple of dollars on me, so I figured it would be the cheapest to buy new gloves at the dollar store. When I went into the store, it was quite big, but there was no other people in there yet, besides the older Asian man behind the front counter. He gave me a big smile and came around the corner to stand next to me. I asked him where the gloves were located, and he said, "I'll show you." As soon as he said this, he laughed, grabbed my left hand with his right hand, and started bringing me towards the back of the store. The back of the store had a display table with some things on it, toys I think. On the wall behind the table was a section with winter items on it, and just to the right of that is a door that says, "Employees Only." Everything happened very fast. When he grabbed my hand and started bringing me towards the back, I just kind of awkwardly laughed because he was laughing, and I just thought he was being overly friendly and he was trying to be super helpful. I had also been in the store a couple times before this, and both times the same guy was there. He was ringing up people and he was always very happy, smiling, laughing with every customer he interacted with. I never got any weird vibes any other time that I was in there. So just as we got back to the area, out of nowhere, it turns from him holding my hand into clamping around my wrist very hard. His hand reaches over and grabs me ridiculously hard. He twists my chest and starts trying to push me towards the employee's door. I could not believe how fast everything had changed and had happened. I'm so happy I had worn my boots that day, because the only thing I could do was to kick him in the shin and try to pull away from him. He went back and forth, with me trying to get away from him while he tried to get a hold of my arm tighter, and while also trying to push me towards the door, while I still tried to land my kicks. In this, he lost his balance and started to fall into the display table, and then I was able to get my arm away, and I just took off running as fast as I could. I ran into the back of the big store. They had customer service, where other people were, and phones. I used the store's phone to call my mom because I don't know why. I was confused. Should I call the cops? I was trying to figure out what just happened, while also realizing, crap, I missed the bus, and I'm going to screw up my first day at the job. I did call the cops, though, after I got off the phone with my mom, who came to get me. The way I looked at it was, okay, I was all right, but what if I had not been so lucky? What if this guy does this to somebody else and they don't get away? What if something even worse could have happened? Or already did? This happened in broad daylight on a weekday morning, so this could happen to anybody. They arrested him, and we had to go down to the station to give my statement. About a week later, there's an article in the newspaper that they arrested 5 people that owned that dollar store, because they had apparently been setting up these dollar stores for a few weeks as a front for some shady stuff, and then they would close it down, wait a month or two, go to a different county, and open another one. Like I said in the beginning of this messed with me for quite a while after that. I didn't feel safe when I left my house. I just wanted to buy a pair of gloves that day, and it's a shame that that one guy had to ruin that. This happened when I was 19. I had gone to spend the day with my grandfather and to help him around his home. Stuff I usually did when I'm not working and I had the time. Well, this day specifically, he needed to go to a friend of his and have him look at some security cameras for him. They needed to be rewired or something. His friend was a wizard with tech, so I drove him there and I was going to stick around till he wanted me to leave. Knowing my grandfather, that wouldn't be till later in the night. Got there maybe around 12, which meant that we would probably be leaving by 8 p.m. or so, which again is fine. I liked his friend, sweet old guy. However, this time, his friend's son was there, a man that I'd never met before this time. To preface, I'm a rather curvy woman. I'm used to comments about it. However, I'm not used to my body being the first subject when I just met somebody. Right off the bat, this man says, "Oh wow, you're hotter than your grandpa said." I thought he was joking, so I laughed a little bit, and I just followed my grandfather inside. Thinking this guy would leave me alone, I joined my grandpa and his friend in a conversation. Well, his son decides it's okay for him to sit next to me and try to wrap his arm around my waist. So keep this in mind, I am tiny, under 5 feet, but I have a zero tolerance for being touched or messed with without my consent, so this did not go over well with me. I removed his hand from me and I get up to move. Immediately he says, "Really? You're just going to ignore me?" He sounded like a child, honestly. I ignore him for what feels like hours, but was probably only 30 minutes or so, until it's decided that we would go to a store down the street, about 10 minutes away. So me, my grandfather, and this piece of crap jump into my car. I didn't want him to go, but his father asked me to let him come. The whole car ride, he's talking about boobs and butts, and how I have a nice figure. My grandpa thinks it's hilarious, until he sees that I'm visibly uncomfortable and angry. Now, I'm not proud of this because it was dangerous, but he called me crazy, so I showed him crazy. We get to the little entrance of the store, dirt road, no other cars. I wasn't planning on getting out of the car, but he was going to stay behind to keep me company, so I got out and had a smoke. About 10 minutes later, my grandfather comes back with what he needed, and we head back to his friends. I asked the guy to step out while I spoke to my grandfather, told my grandpa I was dropping him off, and explained how upset I was that he wasn't standing up for me when he could see how visibly upset it was making me. He said he understood and he apologized. I go home about an hour later, and I get a call and assume it's my grandpa wanting to be picked up. It's around 2 or 3 p.m. at this point. So I answer, and it's my grandpa, as expected, but he's telling me that this piece of crap is gone and that I can come back to hang out, so I did. Everything was fine for around 2 hours. Piece of crap comes stumbling through the gate, drunk as a skunk and extra stupid. I immediately get uncomfortable and I go silent. I sit there and hope that he would just ignore me and take his drunk self inside. But nope, not my luck. He kind of slouches in front of me and goes, "Ah, baby, I knew you'd be back. You missed me, huh?" And he grabs my face. I froze in place. I know I must have looked like a deer in the headlights because it made him go even harder. He tried to kiss me, and all of a sudden he's on the ground. I guess my grandpa had enough and he pushed him over. He was drunk enough. It was easy. My grandfather had me sit beside him. We were only going to be there for an hour or more, and Drunky was too out of it to do anything else. We thought, at least, and we were wrong. He manages to get up and waits until my grandfather has moved from my side to go get our cigarettes from the car. Then the drunk guy proceeds to sit himself on my lap and starts dancing, moving his butt. I don't know what he was doing. Either way, I was not having it, and I finally went off. I started screaming, bloody murder, and hitting him. I punched him so hard that my hand hurt the next day. My grandfather comes back to hear me absolutely losing my crap and punching this piece of crap as hard as I can. He manages to drag me away and get us out of there to the car. This idiot throws a full can of beer at the car and is pissed that he got beat up by a girl. Keep in mind this happened over a span of around 6 hours, so I had a full day to build up and to finally reach a breaking point.